Jason Kane adjusted the cuffs of his diplomatic uniform, shifting uncomfortably under the weight of 100 alien eyes watching him. The Zurich Empire's royal court was nothing like he had imagined. Towering stone pillars, flickering blue torches, and a throne carved from the bones of some massive, long-extinct beast made the place look more like a warrior's arena than a palace. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was just a negotiator, sent by Earth to establish peaceful relations with the Zurichians. No one had warned him that their idea of diplomacy involved combat. Kane Varkos, a broad-shouldered, scared warrior with piercing golden eyes, grinned down at him from the throne. "Human," he said, voice deep and thunderous. "You have earned great honor today." Jason frowned. Honor? That didn't sound right. A few minutes ago, all he had done was dodge a fight. A Zyrek warrior had challenged him for speaking out of turn, and Jason, knowing he had no chance in a fair fight, tripped over his own feet, fell into the guy, and somehow knocked him unconscious against a stone pillar. Now the king was honoring him. That usually meant something bad. "I appreciate the recognition," Jason said carefully, "but let's be clear. I didn't mean to fight your guy." The warriors in the room let out a low rumble of laughter. To them, it didn't matter how Jason had won. He had proven himself, and that made him worthy of something big. "Your victory must be rewarded," Kane Varkos continued, "and what greater reward than a bond with the royal bloodline?" Jason's stomach twisted. Oh no. The king clapped his hands, and suddenly the crowd parted like the sea. Two figures stepped forward, the princesses. The room fell silent. Jason felt every muscle in his body tighten. Oh, this was bad. Zirrak warriors were famous across the stars, unstoppable in battle, fiercely loyal, and utterly terrifying. Jason didn't need to know what these two princesses looked like to understand the situation. He was a human diplomat, not a warrior, and yet he had just been given two of the deadliest women in the Empire as his wives. "Wait, wait, wait," Jason said, lifting his hands. "I think there's been a mistake. See, humans don't exactly." "You refuse the king's gift," a deep voice growled behind him. Jason turned and came face to face with a massive Zyrek warrior, probably the brother of the guy he had knocked out earlier. The warrior's hand rested on the hilt of his energy sword, muscles tense like a coiled spring. Jason swallowed hard. Refusing an honor was an insult. An insult meant a fight. A fight meant Jason would die. His mind raced for a solution. He had survived this long by thinking fast. And right now, he needed an answer that wouldn't get him killed. A diplomatic answer. "I don't refuse," he said quickly. "I just want to understand the full depth of this great honor before I accept." King Varkos studied him for a moment before breaking into a booming laugh. "Bah, you wish to prove yourself further? Good. Then you shall demonstrate your worth. Tonight." Jason felt the blood drain from his face. That didn't sound good. The king raised his hand, and the crowd erupted into cheers. The princesses exchanged glances before stepping forward, their expressions unreadable. "Prepare yourself, human," one of them said smoothly. "This is only the beginning." Jason exhaled. He was in so much trouble. Jason Kane stood in the center of a massive arena, his heart pounding like a drum. Torches flickered along the high stone walls, casting eerie shadows across the jagged ground. Thousands of Zirrak warriors surrounded him, watching in anticipation. He gulped. This was bad. Just an hour ago, he had somehow ended up engaged to two alien princesses because of a ridiculous misunderstanding. And now, he was being forced to prove himself worthy. King Varkos sat on his throne above the crowd, his golden eyes gleaming with amusement. "The trial of the chosen one shall begin," he declared. Jason barely held back a groan. Chosen one. He wasn't chosen for anything. He was a diplomat, not a warrior. Beside him, one of the princesses, Soraya, spoke in a calm, steady voice. "You must survive the trial. If you fail, you bring dishonor to our bond." "No pressure, huh?" Jason muttered. The other princess, Tyra, crossed her arms. "If you are not strong, you do not deserve us." Jason sighed. Why did he feel like he was arguing with fate itself? A loud horn echoed through the arena, and the stone gate across from him rumbled open. A monstrous beast emerged, a six-legged armored creature with gleaming fangs and razor-sharp claws. It let out a deep guttural roar that shook the ground. Jason froze. Oh, come on! A giant murder lizard! He had been expecting a duel or a test of wits, not a fight against something that could swallow him whole. The crowd erupted in cheers. To them, this was just another glorious challenge. Jason, however, had exactly zero plans to wrestle with an alien death beast. He needed to think fast. The creature lunged, its massive claws slicing through the air where Jason had been standing a moment ago. He dove to the side, rolling across the dirt. Okay, running was an option. Fighting, not so much. Soraya and Tyra watched from the sidelines, unreadable expressions on their faces. Were they actually testing him, or just waiting for him to fail? Jason dodged again as the beast swiped at him. He needed to find a weakness. His eyes darted across the arena. Torches, loose stones, the creature's armored body. Then he saw it. The underside of its throat was softer than the rest of its body. Jason grabbed a discarded spear from the ground. He wasn't a warrior, but he knew basic physics. He couldn't overpower the beast, but he could use its strength against it. "Hey, ugly," Jason shouted. He waved the spear like an idiot, taunting the monster. It roared in fury and charged. "That's it, come on." At the last second, Jason sidestepped and planted the spear into the ground, angling it upward. The creature's momentum did the rest. The beast impaled itself on the weapon, its own weight driving the spear deep into its throat. It let out one last ear-splitting roar before collapsing with a heavy thud. Silence. Then, thunderous applause. The crowd erupted, warriors pounding their chests in approval. King Varkos laughed. Impressive. The human uses his mind, not just his body. Jason let out a breath of relief. He had survived. Barely. Soraya stepped forward, her voice softer than before. "Perhaps you are not as weak as I thought." Zera gave him a smirk. "You might be fun after all." Jason sighed. He had survived the first test, but something told him this was only the beginning. Jason's legs still felt unsteady as he stood before King Varkos. The roar of the crowd still echoed in his ears, but all he could think about was how close he had come to being torn apart by that monster. He wiped the sweat from his brow and forced himself to stand tall. He wasn't about to look weak now, especially not in front of the man who had casually handed his daughters over to a total stranger. Varkos leaned forward on his throne, a smirk playing on his lips. "You fight like a cornered animal, human, desperate, clever, and unpredictable." Jason exhaled. Not exactly a compliment, but he'd take it. "Then I've passed your little test?" he asked, hoping, praying, that this madness was over. Varkos chuckled. "You survived. That is enough." Jason wasn't sure if that was a joke or not, but before he could respond, Syra stepped beside him. "This does not mean he is fit to rule beside us," she said, crossing her arms. "A single battle does not make him worthy." Jason sighed. Of course, there was more. Soraya, who had been watching him closely, finally spoke. "Father, we should not delay. The council grows impatient. If Jason is to be part of our family, he must understand what it means to lead." Jason blinked. Part of the family. That sounded serious. Varkos grinned. "Indeed. And what better way to teach a man the burden of power than to give him a kingdom to manage?" Jason stiffened. "Wait, what?" Varkos stood, his massive form casting a long shadow over Jason. "For the next cycle, you will govern one of my outlying provinces. If you succeed, you may call yourself a true member of my court." Jason stared. This was insane. He had just arrived on this planet. He didn't know their customs, their economy. He didn't even know what they used for money. "You can't be serious," he said, almost laughing. "I'm not a ruler." Varkos gave him a sharp look. "Then you will fail, and this arrangement will be undone." Jason felt his stomach twist. Oh, that kind of test. He glanced at Tyra and Soraya. Tyra's expression was unreadable, but Soraya's gaze softened, just a little. Very well, Jason said, squaring his shoulders. But if I'm running a province, I want full authority. No one looking over my shoulder, no hidden rules. Varkos raised an eyebrow. You bargain with a king? Jason met his gaze. I negotiate like any good leader should. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Varkos laughed, loudly. Perhaps you do understand leadership after all, the king bellowed. He clapped his hands. It is settled. You will leave at first light. Jason sighed. What had he just gotten himself into? As the crowd dispersed, Soraya stepped closer to him. Her voice was quieter than before. That was bold. Jason smirked. Was it? She tilted her head. Most men do not challenge my father's authority so openly. Jason shrugged. If I'm going to be stuck in this situation, I might as well play the game my way. Zyra, who had been listening, chuckled. Let's see if you can survive ruling a province. A beast in the arena is one thing, handling our people is another. Jason ran a hand through his hair. They weren't making this easy for him. As he left the throne room, he realized something important. Fighting a monster had been terrifying, but ruling an alien kingdom, that might be even worse. Jason stood on the balcony of the governor's palace, staring at the land he was now supposed to rule. A vast city stretched before him, its streets buzzing with life, alien markets, and towering stone structures that gleamed under the sun. Beyond the city walls lay rolling plains and distant mountains, home to farmers, traders, and, according to the reports he'd been given, more than a few raiders who didn't care much for royal authority. He exhaled. How was he supposed to rule this place? A firm voice cut through his thoughts. You look like a man preparing for battle. Jason turned to see Soraya standing beside him. She was calm, composed, but he could sense something behind her gaze, curiosity, maybe even concern. Feels like one, Jason admitted, crossing his arms. Your father really threw me into the deep end. Soraya tilted her head. That is how we train our warriors. A leader must prove their worth by action, not words. Jason sighed. Great, so I'm supposed to prove myself while a whole city watches me trip over my own feet. Soraya's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. It would be entertaining. Jason smirked. Glad my suffering is amusing. Before she could reply, a sharp voice interrupted them. Thyra. There is trouble, she announced as she strode toward them. A dispute in the market district. The people demand a ruling. Jason blinked. Already? I just got here. Zyra shrugged. A governor's duty does not wait. Jason groaned but straightened his jacket. Fine, let's see what kind of mess I have to clean up. The market district was chaos. Dozens of merchants were yelling, waving their arms and pointing fingers at each other. In the center of the commotion, two traders stood. One was a broad-shouldered man with a thick beard, the other a wiry, sharp-eyed woman. Between them lay a pile of shattered goods, broken vases, and spilled spices. The bearded man pointed an accusing finger at the woman. She destroyed my cart on purpose. The woman scoffed. Your cart was in my way. If you had moved when I asked, this wouldn't have happened. Jason pinched the bridge of his nose. This was ridiculous. Zyra crossed her arms. They demand compensation. You must decide. Jason looked at Soraya, who simply watched in silence, waiting for his response. Right, this was his problem now. He turned back to the arguing merchants. All right, let's break this down. Your cart was blocking the road, he asked the men. Yes, but... Jason held up a hand. And you, he said, looking at the woman, decided the best solution was smashing through it. She folded her arms. I warned him. He didn't move. Jason sighed. This was like dealing with stubborn kids. Okay, here's my ruling, Jason said, stepping forward. You, he pointed at the man, shouldn't have blocked the road. And you, he pointed at the woman, shouldn't have wrecked his cart. So, here's what's going to happen. He turned to the gathered crowd. The market needs to run smoothly, right? Murmurs of agreement. Good. Then from now on, blocking roads with carts is illegal. He pointed at the bearded merchant. That means you pay a fine for causing the problem. The man grumbled but nodded. Jason turned to the woman. And you, since you smashed his property, you split the cost of damages. Sound fair? The woman huffed. I suppose. Jason clapped his hands. Great, now shake hands. Get over it, and let's move on. The merchants exchanged reluctant glances before grudgingly shaking hands. The crowd muttered in approval. As Jason turned to leave, Soraya walked beside him. That was unexpected. Jason smirked. You thought I'd just pick a side. No, she admitted, but you handled it well. Zaira, who had been quiet, spoke. Perhaps you will not fail as quickly as I thought. Jason grinned. Gee, thanks. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Jason barely had time to rest after his Market District ruling before another problem landed on his lap. He sat in the grand hall of the governor's palace, staring at the armored alien warrior in front of him. The man was huge, easily a head taller than Jason, with battle-worn armor and a scar that ran across his cheek. His name was Varric, and from the way he stood, arms crossed, glaring down at Jason, it was clear he wasn't impressed. You are unproven, Varric said, his voice deep and rough. A leader must be strong. You are not one of us. You have not fought beside us. How can we trust you to lead? Jason glanced at Soraya and Zaira, who stood at his sides. Neither spoke, waiting for him to respond. Jason leaned back in his chair. Let me guess, you want to fight me. Varric smirked. A duel. If you are truly fit to rule, you will prove it with strength. Jason sighed. Of course, it had to be a fight. These people respected action, not words. He couldn't exactly give a motivational speech and expect them to follow him. But fighting Varric, that was suicide. Jason wasn't weak. He had military training back on Earth, but Varric looked like he could crush boulders with his bare hands. He needed a plan. Jason stood and stretched his arms. All right, I accept. Soraya's eyes flickered with surprise, but she said nothing. Varric grinned, stepping back. Good. We fight in the arena at sunset. Jason kept his face neutral, but inside, he was already calculating his odds of survival. The arena was a massive stone structure, filled with roaring spectators. The setting sun cast an orange glow over the battlefield, making everything look even more dramatic than Jason would have liked. Jason stood in the center of the ring, gripping a training sword that felt way too light for what was about to happen. Across from him, Varric cracked his knuckles, waiting for the fight to begin. A deep horn echoed through the arena. Varric lunged. Jason barely dodged as a fist the size of a sledgehammer swung past his face. He rolled to the side, gripping his sword tighter. He had speed on his side, but one hit from Varric, and it would be over. Varric smirked. You run well, little ruler. Jason exhaled. Think, think, think. Then, an idea. Jason sprinted toward Varric, but not head-on. He zigzagged, keeping his movements unpredictable. Varric swung again, but Jason ducked, sliding between his legs. Before Varric could turn, Jason grabbed a handful of dust from the ground and threw it into his opponent's eyes. Varric stumbled back, blinking rapidly. The crowd gasped. Jason didn't waste time. He sprinted forward and slammed the blunt side of his sword against the back of Varric's knee. The warrior dropped to one leg. Jason pointed his sword at Varric's chest. Yield. The arena fell silent. Varric looked at Jason, breathing hard. Then, after a long pause, he laughed. A deep, hearty laugh. You fight like a trickster, Varric said, standing up, but you fight to win. He stepped forward and placed a fist over his chest, a sign of respect. The crowd erupted into cheers. Jason exhaled. He had passed the test. As he walked out of the arena, Soraya walked beside him, a rare smile on her lips. You are full of surprises, Jason. Jason smirked. You have no idea. Jason barely had time to celebrate his victory before another surprise came knocking. The duel against Varric had earned him some respect, but it also brought unwanted attention, especially from the king himself. A royal messenger arrived at the governor's palace just before dawn, dressed in ceremonial armor and holding an official scroll. Jason, still half asleep and rubbing his sore muscles from the fight, squinted at the messenger. "You are summoned," the messenger announced. "King Rayler demands your presence at the High Court." Jason groaned internally. Great. Another test. Soraya and Syra stood nearby, looking more serious than usual. "This is important," Syra murmured. "If the king calls you, it means he is deciding your place in this empire." Jason stretched his arms, already knowing he couldn't refuse. "All right," he said. "Let's meet the big guy." The royal palace was a floating fortress resting on a massive anti-gravity platform above the city. Jason stood at the grand entrance, staring up at the towering gold and obsidian pillars. "Not bad," he muttered, adjusting his jacket. Soraya and Syra walked beside him, their expressions unreadable. The moment they entered, they were greeted by a long hall filled with alien nobles in elaborate robes. The air was thick with tension. At the far end of the hall sat King Rayler. He was massive, even while seated on his throne, with an aura of undeniable authority. His golden eyes locked onto Jason the moment he stepped forward. "You are the human who has taken my daughters as his wives," the king said, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. Jason felt the weight of every noble's gaze on him. Yeah," Jason said, scratching the back of his neck. "But to be fair, I didn't exactly sign up for that part." Some nobles gasped. Others whispered. King Rayler's gaze didn't waver, and yet you accepted them. You fought for their honor. You now stand as a leader among my people. Jason hesitated. Was that how they saw him? He had been winning it this whole time, trying to survive one insane situation after another. "I have summoned you," the king continued, "because there is a matter only you can settle." Jason tensed. "And what's that?" The king leaned forward. "A challenge. Another noble family disputes your claim. They say a human is unfit to rule. They demand a final test." Jason sighed. "Let me guess. Another fight." The king's lips curled into a slight smirk. "No, this time, it is a matter of wisdom." Jason blinked. "Wait, what?" Jason sat at a long ceremonial table, staring at the massive puzzle laid out before him. Strange symbols, metallic rings, and glowing crystals covered the surface. Across from him sat Lord Karthos, the noble who had challenged his right to rule. Karthos was smug, confident, and very sure Jason would fail. "The trial of kings," Syra whispered beside him, "a test of intelligence and strategy. Solve the puzzle before your opponent, and you win." Jason took a deep breath. All right, he could do this. Karthos started immediately, moving pieces with precise confidence. Jason, on the other hand, had no clue where to begin. The symbols looked like some ancient alien language. The rings spun in multiple directions, and the crystals reacted to touch in unpredictable ways. His brain worked fast. If brute force didn't work, he needed a different approach. He watched Karthos for a few seconds, noting how the noble adjusted the rings based on the symbols. Jason followed his movements but did the opposite. Suddenly, the crystals pulsed brighter. Jason smirked. "Got it." Karthos frowned, noticing Jason's progress. He worked faster. Jason stayed calm, keeping his pace steady. He trusted his instincts. Then, CLIKK. The puzzle locked into place. A deep chime rang through the hall. Jason looked up. Done. Karthos froze, staring at Jason's completed puzzle in disbelief. The room was silent. Then, cheers erupted. King Rayler smiled, standing from his throne. "It seems this human is more than just a warrior. He is a man of wisdom as well." Jason exhaled, shaking off the tension. He turned to Soraya and Tyra, giving them a small smirk. "Not bad for an Earth guy, huh?" Soraya shook her head. "You are full of surprises, Jason." Zara simply smiled. Jason sat in stunned silence as the cheers of the royal court echoed around him. He had actually won. The trial of kings had seemed impossible at first, but he had done what no one expected. A human had outsmarted a noble of the empire. King Rayler watched him with an amused glint in his golden eyes. "You continue to surprise me, human. Strength in battle is one thing, but wisdom, that is what truly shapes a leader." Jason rubbed the back of his neck. Well, I just went with my instincts. The king let out a deep chuckle. And that is why you succeed. He stood, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over the court. Jason of Earth, you have proven your worth. As of this moment, you are not only the husband of my daughters, but also a recognized lord of this empire. Jason blinked. Wait, what? The court erupted into murmurs, some approving, some clearly not. Lord Carthos looked like he had swallowed a bitter fruit. Your Majesty, surely you do not mean. I mean exactly what I say. The king cut in, his voice firm. This human has shown he can stand among us. To question that is to question my judgment. Jason wasn't sure how to feel. He had barely adjusted to being married to 2 alien princesses, and now he was a noble. What next? His own starship. Soraya and Tyra, standing beside him, remained silent but exchanged glances. You honor me, Your Majesty, Jason finally said, but what does being a lord actually involve? King Rayler smirked. You will learn soon enough. Jason wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a very bad thing. Later that evening, Jason found himself alone on a balcony, looking over the city below. The twin moons hung in the sky, their soft glow reflecting off the buildings. Thinking about running, a voice teased. Jason turned to see Soraya, arms crossed, watching him with an amused look. He chuckled. Tempting, but I doubt I'd get very far. She stepped beside him, leaning on the railing. You handled yourself well today. Most outsiders wouldn't have survived their first challenge, let alone won the king's favor. Jason sighed. Yeah, but what happens next? I don't know how to be a lord. I barely know how to be a husband. Soraya smirked. That part is easy. Just don't get yourself killed. Jason laughed. Great advice. A moment of silence passed between them, comfortable yet charged. The cool night breeze carried the distant hum of the city. Then Soraya spoke, her voice softer. You're not like the men of our world, Jason. He glanced at her. That a good thing or a bad thing? She hesitated, then smiled. I haven't decided yet. Jason couldn't look away. For all their banter, all their clashes, there was something undeniable between them. A pull. Before he could say something dumb, a second voice broke the moment. Am I interrupting? They turned to see Tyra, standing at the entrance with an unreadable expression. Soraya straightened. No. Zyra walked toward them, eyes locked on Jason. I have something for you. Jason raised a brow. A gift? She nodded and pulled out a small metallic device. It was sleek, with intricate carvings running along its surface. This belonged to my mother. Tyra said quietly. She was a strategist, a thinker. She would have respected what you did today. Jason took the device carefully. What is it? A memory cube. Tyra explained. It contains knowledge, tactics, wisdom, history. You may not know how to be a lord yet, but with this, you will learn. Jason stared at the cube, a strange warmth spreading in his chest. He looked up at Tyra, seeing something soft in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Thank you, he said sincerely. She gave a small nod. Soraya glanced between them, then smirked. Careful, Tyra. You're starting to like him. Zyra didn't deny it. Jason sat on the balcony, staring at the stars. The twin moons glowed softly in the night sky, their light reflecting off the towering spires of the city. He turned the small memory cube over in his hands, its intricate carvings cool against his fingers. Zyra's gift had surprised him. It wasn't just a tool, it was trust. She was giving him a piece of her family's legacy, something that held value beyond politics or duty. And that meant something. Footsteps approached. Soraya. You've been quiet, she said, sitting beside him. Unusual for you. Jason chuckled. Just thinking about everything. Soraya leaned forward, her arms resting on the railing. Second thoughts. Not exactly, Jason said, but this is a lot. A few days ago, I was just a guy trying to survive. Now, I'm married to alien royalty. I've been named a lord, and I apparently have to help shape an empire. He exhaled. It's insane. Soraya smirked. It's our normal. Jason shook his head. Well, your normal is insane. Soraya laughed, a rare, genuine laugh. A second set of footsteps echoed behind them. Zaira stepped onto the balcony, her expression unreadable. You should rest, she said. Tomorrow will not be easier. Jason looked at her. You always this comforting. Zaira folded her arms. I am honest, and honesty is better than false comfort. Jason grinned. Right, can't argue with that. A moment passed between them. Unspoken understanding, mutual respect. Soraya glanced between them, then sighed. You two are making this harder than it needs to be. Jason raised a brow. What do you mean? Soraya leaned in, lowering her voice. You think too much. You worry too much. Yes, you're human. Yes, this situation is insane. But you've already done the impossible. You've won over the court. You've won over my father. And somehow, she glanced at Zaira. You've won over us. Jason's heart skipped. Zaira didn't deny it. Jason looked between them. These two powerful, intelligent, and terrifyingly amazing women weren't just his wives in name. They had chosen him. For the first time since he arrived in this world, Jason wasn't just surviving. He was belonging. He took a deep breath. All right, if we're doing this, we do it together. He looked at Soraya. No holding back. Soraya grinned. Never. Then he turned to Zaira. And no treating me like some outsider. Zaira tilted her head. That was never my intention. Jason smirked. Then I guess I'm stuck with you too. Soraya chuckled. You better be. For the first time, Jason felt ready. The future was uncertain, the challenges ahead daunting, but he wasn't alone. And together, they would change everything.